Hey everybody, welcome back to another Sunday special where I take a look at a bunch of different markets and share my personal favorite trade setups and technical analysis points. If you want to skip ahead to any of the markets that we're going to be covering in this, you can actually see them down here. You can skip ahead to any of the different markets that you see there, and I'll be doing my personal technical analysis on all of these. These all have something that I'd like to point out or talk about, so stay tuned, or you can just watch the full thing. But before we get too far, please do me a favor. If you enjoy these Sunday specials, I do them every Sunday. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy them and you want to see them more. And as long as people are enjoying them, I'll keep doing them. So let's dive into this. We're going to take a look first actually at the S&P 500. And this one was really interesting because last week we saw the first time where we got a really substantial sell-off in actually a long time, right? We saw this dip back here in June, but it was very quickly erased by bulls. But that's not quite what we saw here this past week, which is really, really interesting going into this week, because we did actually close underneath the 20-period moving average. We saw a lot of momentum after this sharp rise. We saw a lot of momentum turn back the other way, which to me actually signals that we could be in for a little bit of a ride here back down to some key levels, which we'll highlight right now. So let's go ahead, and first I'm going to show you guys just a key level of support structure that I'm going to be looking at when it comes to the S&P 500. I will be watching this pair pretty closely. This similar to the US 30, the SPX 500, these are all going to look pretty much very similar. So as we look at this, if we do see the dip here, I think we could actually see some potential buyback in this area. We could see the dip run back to this way. I think it does have room to keep going lower, especially after we closed underneath that 20-period moving average. But again, the way this candle closed on the daily last week, on last Friday, we did get a lot of bullish momentum towards the end of the day. So it will be interesting to see if we can get some more close underneath that 20-period moving average. My guess would be, or probability, I would say, probably going down to this level here, this key structure support. A lot of times when the market dips, it usually will go right to a key level. In this case, that 20-period moving average, you can see we bounced off of it temporarily, then we shot back underneath it and closed just around it. So this level clearly is being spotted, or is in the mind of traders and investors here in the market right now. So I think there's two main levels here. I think that if we come down lower, we could be due to retest this level here right around the 3250 mark at this previous level of resistance turned support. The other key level here that I think we could watch out for is that if we do see the continued sell-off, I'm watching that 200-day moving average. You guys know, if you watch the channel, I like looking at the 200-day moving average as a simple indication of long-term trend. We are above this right now, so that means that we are in a context of an uptrend. So my interest right now would probably be buying into a pullback if we get down to a key level like these two. In fact, there might be a way to combine them. So what if we saw something like this, where we get the 200 period and that supportive structure in this general area? To me, that's a pretty good high probability buy setup that might be something to consider. That might not be this week, but we'll see. You never know, when markets get selling like this, they can really move. So just my top idea there for the S&P 500. Let's talk about the euro, because we've been seeing some interesting stuff here with the euro. We saw a little bit of bearishness this week, or this past week, on the euro USD. You can see on the daily chart, we are still in a very strong upward trend overall, but this trend is, to me, looking tired here in the short term. What I mean by that is we've had an incredible rise on the euro. Basically, I think the big indication is that the US dollar has actually been plummeting, right? Which causes the euro to go up in relation. So we've seen the euro dollar making its move higher, but it's slowing down. Okay, and what I mean by that is you can actually see it in the 20-period moving average. Check this out. So we had a lot of momentum here, and then we kind of stalled, but now we've seen a lot of momentum pick up again, and now we're seeing this really starting to grind to a halt. Now, that doesn't mean that the price can't keep going up. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I am saying is that a lot of times when you get the momentum slow, it's because momentum may slowly be shifting back the other way. And so a lot of times, trend followers are waiting for that momentum to pick back up before they try and get involved. But if there is no momentum, if the momentum is slowing down, that may actually favor a reasonable pullback, which is what I think is probably due for this week. in the euro dollar. Now, I've been saying that for a little while though, because we've just been chopping back and forth. We haven't really seen much action, but my bias here is still to the downside. I think it is very possible that we could see a little bit more of some give back here on this euro dollar pair. Again, I've highlighted this level a couple different times, but if we get down to this structural support level, I'd say that this, similar to our concept we just talked about on the S&P 500, could be an interesting buy zone in terms of a pullback off of that recent high that we formed up there at 1.2. So we actually came up and tagged 1.2 here on the euro just before falling back down off of that high. So we'll see if we get a little bit of follow through this week off after that kind of initial dip, and looking for potential buys if we get a bigger pullback into a region like this. Now, I know this is a little bit longer term, so if we drop it down to the 4-hour chart, some shorter term levels is if you are interested in looking for short setups, the break underneath this level to me looks pretty interesting. So based on our 1-day analysis, right, we could look at the lower time frames, looking at this 4-hour and even the 1-hour chart, and see, okay, we're in this channel, but if we break underneath, looking for the sell side pullback could actually be a really nice trade setup. So I also like this concept here on the euro dollar. Again, momentum starting to slow here, looking like we could, if we saw a solid break, could lead into some bigger dips back down to that key level we talked about, right around that 1.145. So just my thoughts there on euro dollar. Next up is the pound dollar. Similar story. If we take a look at the daily candles, you can see that we are in fact seeing a little bit of momentum slow down, right? Because here's what we see. We see this big solid run up. Look at the angle. And then we look here, still running up, but a slightly less inclined angle. What that can tell us is that, okay, momentum looks like it may be slowing. So if we do see that pullback, where could we see the pullback to? Well, let's zoom out on the daily chart, see if we get any information from historical levels of structure. There's nothing that really sticks out to me, if I'm honest, when I'm looking here at the pound dollar. Some levels, of course, could be this level. You could argue that, you know, this structural level looks pretty interesting. But the reason it looks more interesting than just the support and resistance is our key favorite level here, that 200-day moving average. You guys know, I say it all the time, I really like this as a level of trend indication. So we are trading above that, and so is the 20. So we've got a bullish market here, but even in a bullish market, looking for pullbacks is sometimes my favorite setup, right? So looking for something like that could give us a decent buy zone. So this is my idea, is right now short-term bearish on all of these, saying that basically the US dollar could have some room to come up. I could be wrong about this. People love to point out when I'm wrong, or, you know, it is what it is. I'm not going to be right all the time. I'm just sharing my personal analysis. And so I think that the chances are pretty good that we could see a little bit more give back before buyers kind of are set to reload and try and jump back into this trend. So that's my opinion there on pound dollar as well. Dollar yen, let's take a look at this one. We'll look at the daily chart, and really this one's been super, super choppy. I like the idea of looking for breaks either way on this though, in terms of we've kind of got this wedge formation where price is just back and forth. We are overall underneath that 200-day moving average. So looking for the break, if we did get that dollar strength that we talked about, there could be trade setups looking to counter trend trade this back to the 200-day. That is something within the realm of possibility, something to think about. And then the other way as well, we could look for the breakdown and look for the continuation, depending on what the market wants to do. So either way, instead of trying to predict exactly what's going to happen, we could react and look for setups that give us a pretty decent risk to reward, give us a pretty decent setup where we could make some money. So that's my thought there on dollar yen. Let's take a look at dollar Canadian. Saw some momentum here to the downside on Friday, but overall you can see we did try and make this little jump back up, but it failed out pretty quickly. We are towards back the lows. Really nothing too much here, but I did want to pull this chart up just because we've been talking about dollar pairs a lot. Lots of momentum to the downside here on dollar Canadian. So we could see that continue, but I think, you know, for me, there's not really anything too interesting about dollar Canadian right now. A lot of people are looking at it because of, you know, oil prices, and the CAD often trades very similar to oil. So that's something to keep in mind, but really nothing too interesting to me. And if there's not a trade setup, I'm not going to force one. So that's just my thought on dollar Canadian. Let's take a look at AUD USD. Now this one is also kind of interesting because we've been in this super strong uptrend overall. And to me, the big thing here is looking at something like the 4-hour chart. If you're trying to be a buyer, there might be some short-term trades. We already saw this dip get bought up pretty hard on Friday. So, you know, if we see the continuation, that might be, you know, nothing here to play with. But if we did see something like this week, right, another retest, or just a retest before going higher, there could be some opportunities to look for that as well. So I like this trend continuation, just playing the bounce. We've been playing it for some time here. We've seen a lot of move here, just kind of pulling back, bouncing up, pulling back, bouncing up. Lots of momentum here. Overall on AUD USD, we are above that 200-day moving average. Lots of uptrend strength right now. I remember actually sharing a idea of potentially being long in this area, and it was purely because price had gotten extremely extended, and people were saying no way, there's no chance it goes any higher than this, it's going down to nothing. And so I want to say that if something looks very stretched, a lot of times it is, but Aussie dollar to me really does not look too overextended at this point. If we actually back out to the weekly chart, you can see this could just be the very beginning of a bigger move here on Aussie dollar to me right now, because again, it's very dissimilar to what we saw back in March, where we saw this incredibly steep sell-off that was met with a lot of bounce back, right? We are seeing a steep rise, don't get me wrong, but it's not nearly as big as this. I'd say that for a healthy trend continuation on Aussie dollar, we probably do want to see a pullback at some point that gives fresh buyers the chance to get involved. That level could be, I like this idea here of a pullback potentially to 0.7025 roughly. That could be a decent, a little bit steeper of a pullback if you're waiting for something like that. If you're interested in being a bull, might be an idea to think about there. Let's take a look at New Zealand dollar while we're on the subject. This is going to look very similar. You can actually see these two pairs often trade in a very similar way. Long term, you can see this one has also gone down relative to the dollar. But if we look at the weekly chart, same kind of story. This could just be the beginning, honestly, of a bigger move to the upside on some of these pairs. We got that break, we got that retest, and now we're seeing the continuation. That continuation will be interesting to watch if we can get up to a longer term level here. Maybe something like 0.75 could even be in play at some point here on New Zealand dollar. But really no short-term setups for me right now on these pairs. Not super interested in them, but just wanted to include them in this week's analysis. Let's talk about pound yen because pound yen has been a really interesting pair. Lots of momentum to the upside recently. We actually caught some winners on this pair in the A1 trading community. Fortunately, I was able to catch some of the momentum to the upside. I think it was around the break of this. I looked to get long. I did not catch too much because we did get stopped out on a retest. Basically, I trailed my stop in and got stopped out. But the momentum here, if it picks up again, I'd be happy to look for more buy-side setups so long as we started seeing that momentum go back up, right? So if we were to see let's get back to the end here. If we were to start to see something like, a breakout of structure here and maybe even a break past the highs, there could be room for that momentum to kind of explode and keep going. So pound yen is one of those pairs. It can just trend and trend and trend. So when it does start trending, I'd rather be looking to get involved, being selling in this or buying in this, right? Selling in this. It's better in my view to just go along with this pair rather than try and fight it, because it is a very aggressive pair. Let's talk about gold. Speaking of aggressive different assets, gold actually pulling back here for the first time in a while. So kind of interesting. We are actually underneath the 20 period moving average, and we closed underneath the 20 for this week. That to me is a pretty interesting thing because we've been holding above it for some time, pretty much closing out each week above it for the last several weeks. But closing underneath it does not necessarily mean that we're done with this trend, but it does signal some potential signs of momentum slow on this market, which actually this level here that we put in, kind of the low that we've been respecting recently, if that gets broken, I'd say there could actually be short-term bearish plays in position here for gold. That could mean a move back to that crazy 200 period moving average that we so often talk about here on the channel. So watching to see if price wants to get back down there could be interesting. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind on gold for this week. If price were to come back to that area, I'd be interested in personally getting involved with gold, maybe on a longer term buy side position. Of course, that may be out in the future somewhere, but if you keep watching the market updates here, then I probably will share my thoughts at some point or another. That's all I've got for this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please, again, maybe share it with a friend, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thanks so much, and we'll see you back in the next video.